It was really a difficult time. Prayed over the mail in hopes there was enough money that would come in that day to get us through one more day. And at one point we even went to the lawyer and we said, is it time to go bankrupt?
Hi, I'm Alan Goedecke. I'm the recent past owner or president and manager of Goedecke Decorating. I've been in the business for, just added it up, about 51 years I've spent in this business, and 45 of that was running the business.
And I'm Nancy Goedecke. I probably started working in the business as a volunteer on Saturdays when the children were small and they would watch TV in the back room and play outside, and kind of worked my way up from that. My original profession is actually a school teacher, and I found out that sales and teaching are kind of about the same.
When we first started the business, for instance, we knew very little about retailing. I'd never run any kind of a retail store. I'd never even worked in a retail store. And when I took over the business, we were just a contracting business. We had painting and wallpapering. We did some fancy faux finishing type work like gold leafing and wood graining. I had some very talented men working for me that my dad and grandfather had taught how to do some of these fancy things.
Hi, I'm George Goedecke. I am the oldest son of Herbert, and my grandfather was George. My grandfather Goedecke immigrated to this country in 1923. Right after my grandfather got here, the United States put a ban on immigration. And so my grandmother and her three kids, which included my dad and his two sisters, they were left in Germany. And it took them a long time, and finally in 1925 they got here, and they came into Ellis Island. They looked like they were like death warmed over almost. They were all sickly and very thin, because the conditions in Germany were very bad during that time. Now, most of the immigrants of those days came over here to work in the textile mills. But my grandfather just wanted to get out of Germany and get away from all the misery that was over there. He began a painting business. Now, he didn't have any truck or any vehicle, and I heard people talk about him pulling ladders around on a cart and his paint on a cart to get to the jobs. Herbert, I guess he was called Herbie by most people, my dad was. He worked with my grandfather. My dad was the real go-getter who would keep things going, and he could keep jobs going. He was also, not only did he do good work, he was fast. And if they saw a job going south, he would get in there with the guys and he'd start painting with them, hanging wallpaper. And he was so fast, it would boggle your mind. In the 40s, when World War II started, my dad was drafted into the Air Force. And so my grandfather pretty much ran the business alone. And then after the war, my dad was back working with him, and a number of his employees were also veterans that I worked with him, mostly from the Navy. He had a very good crew of people. It was primarily a contracting business, and they weren't really into selling. But in order to get his paint at a reasonable price, he had to become a dealer. So he was a Martinson Ore paint dealer, and he also used to get Dutch Boy. Because of the Williamsburg colors that were fairly sought after, people would contact the company and ask about where can I buy Williamsburg's colors. Well, they would contact my dad, and even though he didn't have a store, he would get the paint and he would sell it out of his house. And I think he also sold wallpaper too to some people, just as the fact that he had all the different wallpaper books for use in their own construction work. us kids, when we were going to school, we'd work for my dad.
When I started in the business as a teenager, we were doing way more than what we were kind of slated to do, which was painting and decorating. We were supplying the wallpaper. We were supplying new shades for a customer. We were repairing their shades. We were, if they needed carpet for an area, we would find someone that could put it in, and we would supervise it and make sure that it was done properly. We were just dabbling in that.
Because we were basically a painting business. We weren't a store. It was all, but we did everything that people wanted. Alan's dad was always ready to go, yeah, we can do that.
Yes, there were things that he showed me. I said, he'd say that we were going to do something, and I'd say, Dad, when have you ever done that? And he would say, well, I've never done that before, but if somebody else can do it, I can learn. And he would. He'd learn. He'd research it. He'd figure it out. I remember when we had a job with the Manchester City Library for the historic New Hampshire room. And we could not find a fabric for the draperies that was appropriate. So my dad got the idea that we would silk screen a fabric that would have New Hampshire scenes, like the shipyard in Portsmouth, the State House in Concord, the State Seal. And we got a company to make up the screens. And then I can remember in our shed actually silk screening these designs onto fabric. I had never even seen silk screening before. Didn't really understand it much because I was probably only, 16, 17 years old. But we came up with a beautiful design, and it was really made quite an impression to everyone after the whole room was remodeled and that we had the New Hampshire room at the Manchester City Library.
My dad was honesty, integrity, quality of workmanship. He used to always tell us, use the right tool for the right job. My brother Alan is the family member with the vision. After my dad died in 1971, Alan had been working with him for some years. He had the idea that he wanted to get into the retail business while they were still doing construction work. And he sort of had to do something because after my dad died, the business had been in my mother's house, and now my mother didn't want all that paint and ladders and everything else at her house. So Alan decided he was going to find a place to set up his business, and when he picked his location in Bedford, he got a lot of ridicule. He said, why would you ever want to be out on Route 101? There's not much out there. Turns out, he had some pretty good ideas on where to go and where to locate.
We were the second business of our type in the state to computerize. And it was with fear and trepidation. One of my best friends told me, once you computerize, you can't go back. It won't work. And that scared us, and we didn't want to lose that personal touch. And we finally decided that these computers had so much going for them that we could actually have an account for every customer. An individual account. We could track their history. We could have their name and address and phone number. We didn't have to ask for that, but the one time that we put it in the first time. And then if we wanted to look something up, we would know what we sold them before and what was compatible, what would work with something that we did. And so that was one way that we wanted to serve our customers in a more personal way. The big box stores were coming in, and they were just that. They were a big box. They had lots of stuff. Some of it was inexpensive. Some of it was cheap. Some of it was good. But you couldn't get anyone to really give you the advice that you needed on how to use things. And we wanted to set ourselves apart and be able to give that service that so people got the right goods at the right price that they needed, that not something that we had on hand so that we wanted to move it out the door. We've stocked very little in some ways. We've stocked the essentials, and we've stocked only the things that we think are going to be very valuable to our customers.
Part of the reason why we went with Hunter Douglas as the primary company for supplying what we call hard treatments, things that aren't draperies, was because they're so innovative. So because we're a Hunter Douglas gallery, whatever new product comes out, we get it first. And we are always going to the training and trying to learn all about the new technology so that when our customers need help, we know we can help them and provide what they need.
The customer for us is the most important part of our business. We have many customers who are second and third generation.
Yeah, it's fun to build a relationship with people. They come in months later, years later, and if you're lucky, you remember who they are, remember something about them, and because we don't tend to want to look at customers as dollar signs. We want to see them as people that we can spend time with and help them to realize what they want to do for decorating their home. So it's when we were first married, we'd have customers that would come and say, "Oh, I remember when your grandfather worked for me," or for Alan, and then later from his father.
Yeah, we've talked about all the good times, but it hasn't always been all rosy and everything going right. We had some hard times too. In particular, when the real estate crisis hit in the late 70s up here.
And the banking crisis, yeah.
Yeah, it was a real estate and banking crisis, and the real estate market just evaporated. The house sales were almost non-existent. And because we're tied in with the housing trade and with houses, we were greatly affected. Our sales were cut in half over a 3-year period.
And that's tough because you have employees that you want to provide for them and you don't want to let them go when they've been doing their job, but it was a really hard time because we had to let people go that we didn't want go, and because we waited, it made it even harder. And in the midst of that, Alan had a heart attack. It was really a difficult time, but we thank God that we got through it. It was a lot of times where we prayed over the mail in hopes there was enough money that would come in that day to get us through one more day. And at one point we even went to the lawyer and we said, is it time to go bankrupt? And he said, well, not yet. And so we limped along, and Alan did some creative financing where we had a few resources that we could kind of bring some money in, and it was a hard time. Alan would spend all his time answering the phone, trying to tell our creditors, what we could and couldn't pay, and whether the check was in the mail. And he had to build trust with all those suppliers that if he said the check was in the mail and the check was for a certain amount, that they would release the order because they saw that he meant what he said. So it was, whenever I start getting too high and mighty thinking, wow, look how great we're doing, I go, okay, wait a minute. Remember when you cried one morning before breakfast because things were looking really bad? Remember when God provided in amazing ways through amazing circumstances that could only be provided by God. The boys have really moved us into the next millennium or whatever, because they've got us doing things that we never even dreamed that we would do. The fact that we're doing these kitchens and bathrooms, and I look at the beautiful pictures and go, those are things that we have done? Everything looks like it just popped out of a high-end magazine, and yet these are things that we have done. So it's kind of amazing the way the boys have brought the business forward to a whole new business.
to know that the boys are running the business in a very good manner. They've got a good rapport with our employees and the customers. So often I hear, well, Herb fixed this, or set me up with this, or Peter got this for me and did this. And to know that they're taking care of the customers and solving the problems, it's a wonderful feeling to be able to pass on the business.
And they like it.
Yeah.
And they get along. You know, they were normal brothers that fought like brothers do, and they're very different, but they both work hard, and they don't check on each other to see if they're doing their job. They're doing a great job just working together as a team.
We have a wonderful time with our family, and it's so important to us to just, we can shoot the breeze about some of the problems in the business, and maybe Nancy and I can help solve something or give the kids some ideas of a way they might approach a situation.
Although we try to have a rule when we're away and we're at the lake, we don't talk about business. It sneaks in there once in a while, but we pretty much try to keep that away.
It's just really a great feeling to see the business moving into the 4th generation, and the 5th is even starting. And that's pretty neat. That's pretty neat for us to see that.
Goedecke Flooring and Design.
Making your home beautiful.
One spectacular room at a time.